Before we start the video, don't forget to like the video and send blessings upon the Prophet Muhammad. Let's gather 1,000 likes and 1,000 subscribers. Subscribe to the channel Stories and Secrets to receive all new updates. She got married while she was still a young girl, inexperienced with the world except through dreams and illusions. She lived under the care of a conservative family who knew and feared God, believing that marriage was a veil, mercy, and tranquility. Her father chose for her the son of one of his friends, a man older than her by several years but wealthy and well-off. She was not given a chance to think. Everyone around her kept repeating that marriage should not be rejected as long as the man was religious and wealthy. The marriage happened quickly without preparing her for the path ahead. She entered her husband's house like a stranger in a palace whose corners she did not know. Her husband was always busy and only paid attention to her when he needed something. He spent his time between work, gatherings with friends, and constant travel. Days passed, and she began to feel like a mere piece of furniture in the house. Her voice was unheard, and her presence was not felt. Months and years went by as she tried to hold herself together, being patient and hopeful. She wore her best clothes, cooked the best meals she knew, and waited for a glance of kindness from him. But he no longer saw her, even in her simplest rights as a wife. She was absent, lonely, although married, living within walls as if in a silent grave. As time passed, her loneliness grew deeper. The walls of that grand palace felt more like a prison, cold and unwelcoming. Her days became repetitive and hollow, waking up to an empty house, preparing meals no one praised, and waiting for her husband's return, which sometimes took days. He was always busy with his work and his social life, leaving her alone in a vast, silent home. She tried to be strong, to hold on to hope that things might change. She dressed in her finest clothes, hoping to catch even a flicker of attention from him. She cooked with care, pouring all her love into every dish, yearning for a sign of gratitude or warmth. But he barely noticed. Her presence was invisible, her feelings unheard. Months passed, then years. She felt herself fading away, becoming nothing more than a shadow, a piece of furniture in the large house. Her heart ached with silence and neglect, but she kept her faith. She believed marriage was a sacred bond, of veil and mercy, as she had been taught. So she endured the coldness and the silence. Eventually, due to the expansion of her husband's business and his frequent travels, he hired a young servant to help with the household chores. This young man was not Saudi, but from another nationality. Unlike her husband, he was polite and calm, fulfilling his duties without complaint. At first, she was cautious around him. Her conservative upbringing did not allow her much freedom to speak or be close to others, especially men. But over time, the servant became present in every corner of the house. He knew the details of her life better than her husband did. Little by little, he began to notice her sadness. Her eyes revealed more than she could hide. She did not speak of her pain, but each day she silently crumbled inside. The servant, a man who had lived poverty and loneliness himself, began to understand her suffering. One day, he left a cup of tea in front of her and said softly, "You do not deserve this neglect." She didn't respond but broke down in tears. That simple sentence was the first time someone truly saw her pain. From that moment, something began to change inside her. That simple act of kindness, a cup of tea and a few words, stirred feelings she hadn't allowed herself to feel for years. The servant, with his quiet presence and gentle understanding, became a silent companion to her loneliness. She started to look forward to his presence, the brief conversations they shared, the stories he told about his homeland and hardships, and the way he listened when she spoke, even if only about small daily matters. His appreciation for her cooking, his quiet compliments, brought a faint warmth into her otherwise cold existence. But she was also painfully aware of the danger. She knew in her heart that what was happening was a slippery slope, a forbidden closeness that could lead to ruin. Her upbringing, her faith, and the fear of society's judgment weighed heavily on her conscience. Every kind word, every glance shared, felt like stepping closer to a precipice. One afternoon, after finishing her afternoon prayers, she sat quietly reading from the Quran. The calmness of the words filled her briefly with peace. Suddenly, There was a soft knock on the back kitchen door. When she opened it, the servant was standing there, holding a white rose. "I saw this in the market," he said quietly. "It reminded me of your purity." Her heart raced. She was overwhelmed by a mixture of emotions, embarrassment, confusion, hope, and fear. Her hands trembled as she closed the door, without a word, retreating to her quiet corner. That night, sleep eluded her. She lay awake, her mind swirling with thoughts and feelings she barely understood. Days turned into weeks. Her husband was often away for weeks on end, ignoring her messages and calls. He no longer recognized her as his wife. His absence was both physical and emotional. With no one else to turn to, her conversations with the servant grew longer, deeper. She began to share fragments of her soul with him, seeking solace in his understanding. The servant treated her with respect, yet their growing closeness was dangerous. He never crossed the line but was always there, a quiet shadow in her lonely world. She felt torn between her duties, her faith, and the warmth she found in his company. One cold night, the servant approached her more closely than ever before. His hand reached out, trembling, but he did not touch her. Instead, he whispered, "If you want, I would leave everything behind for you." Her heart pounded, not with joy but with fear. She jumped up, her voice trembling as she cried out, "Fear God! Stop this." Then she slammed the door shut, collapsing in tears. After that intense night, the silence between them grew heavier. The weight of unspoken words and forbidden feelings filled the empty spaces of the grand house. She felt trapped between duty and desire, between faith and loneliness. Every corner of that palace echoed with the memories of her shattered hopes and the quiet companionship she found in the servant. The servant, too, felt the pull of something deeper, a connection forged in shared pain and silent understanding. But he was a man bound by honor and constraints of his position. He knew that crossing any boundary would mean ruin for them both. So he remained a shadow, present, attentive, yet always distant enough to keep the fragile line intact. Days passed slowly. The seasons shifted outside, unnoticed by most, but deeply felt by her. The scorching heat of summer turned to the cool breeze of autumn, mirroring the restless turmoil in her heart. Each morning, she would rise early, gaze out at the horizon, longing for a sign, a change, anything to break the monotony. Inside, the grand palace was both a prison and a sanctuary. The ornate walls and luxurious furnishings offered no comfort against the emptiness she felt. The laughter and conversations of distant gatherings filtered faintly through the thick walls, reminding her of a world from which she was excluded. Her husband's absence was a constant ache. His silence spoke louder than any words. She sent messages and calls, but they went unanswered, swallowed by the void of his indifference. Alone, she sought refuge in prayer, finding fleeting solace in the verses that echoed the pain and hope in her heart. The servant, sensing her despair, became her confidant. Their conversations, once cautious and sparse, grew into moments of genuine connection. He shared stories of his own struggles, a childhood marked by hardship, a longing for a place to belong. She listened, her heart softening with empathy. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden hues through the windows, they found themselves sitting side by side in the quiet kitchen. The air was thick with unsaid emotions. The servant spoke gently. "You are not alone, even if it feels that way." Her eyes welled up with tears. She wanted to believe him, to cling to the warmth of his words. Yet, the fear of what could happen if their bond was discovered loomed over her like a dark cloud. Her mind raced with conflicting thoughts. She was a wife, bound by vows and expectations. She was a woman yearning for affection and understanding. She was a prisoner of circumstance, caught between worlds. That night, she prayed more fervently than ever before, seeking guidance and strength. Her heart whispered prayers for freedom. Freedom from loneliness, from neglect, from invisible chains that bound her. The servant, too, grappled with his feelings. He longed to protect her, to offer her a life of dignity and love. But he knew that their realities were worlds apart, and crossing that divide would invite disaster. Days turned into weeks, and the tension between hope and despair tightened its grip. She found herself standing at a crossroads, One path leading to silence and submission, the other to risk and uncertain freedom. Her story was not just about a woman and a servant. It was a tale of resilience, of silent battles fought in the shadows, of a soul yearning to break free from the chains of neglect. The days that followed were a quiet torment for her, each moment stretching endlessly like the empty halls of the grand palace. The silence was no longer just an absence of sound. It became a presence, heavy, suffocating, and relentless. It pressed upon her chest like an invisible weight, making it difficult to breathe, to think, to simply exist. Her mornings began with a ritual of prayer and silent tears. Alone in her room, she would sit by the window, the soft light of dawn filtering through delicate curtains, casting gentle patterns on the floor. She would trace her fingers along the edges of a worn prayer mat, finding solace in the familiarity of the words she recited, words that spoke of patience, mercy, and hope. But even these sacred moments could not fully shield her from the creeping despair. Outside, the world moved on. The city bustled with life. Children laughing on the streets, vendors calling out their wares, the distant hum of traffic and life beyond the palace walls. Yet inside, she was trapped in a liminal space, caught between the past she could not reclaim and a future shrouded in uncertainty. Her husband's absence was a shadow that loomed over every corner of the house. Rumors floated to the servants' quarters, whispers of business deals, late-night gatherings, and travels that seemed endless. He was a man consumed by ambition and distraction, leaving behind a home that felt like a hollow shell. His neglect was not only physical but emotional, a wound that bled quietly but deeply. The servant remained her unexpected companion in this desolation. His presence was a flicker of warmth in the cold expanse of her life. They shared moments, small and fleeting, that brought light into the darkness. When he spoke of his own struggles, she saw in his eyes a reflection of her own loneliness and longing. His stories were filled with hardship, sacrifice, and dreams deferred, yet there was a quiet dignity in his words. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned a bruised purple, she found herself in the kitchen, preparing a simple meal. The fragrant aroma of spices filled the air, mingling with the fading light. The servant entered quietly, carrying a small bundle, fresh bread, and a pot of sweet tea. He set them down gently, his eyes meeting hers with an unspoken understanding. For a moment, time seemed to pause. The noise of the outside world faded, and all that remained was a shared silence between two souls seeking comfort. She felt the weight of her solitude lift, even if just for a breath. But with it came the sharp sting of reality, the knowledge that their connection was fragile, precarious. She longed for freedom. Freedom from loneliness, from neglect, from the invisible prison that surrounded her. Yet, she feared the consequences of stepping beyond the boundaries imposed upon her. The fear of scandal, of judgment, of losing what little dignity she had left, held her captive. In the quiet hours of night, her thoughts raced. Memories of her childhood, the warmth of her family, the innocence of youth, clashed with the stark reality of her present. She mourned the loss of dreams she never had a chance to chase, the love she never received, the life that was meant to be but never came. Her heart was a battlefield, torn between hope and despair, between faith and desire. She prayed for strength, for guidance, for a sign that she was not alone in this struggle. The verses of the Quran became her refuge, their rhythms soothing her troubled soul. The servant, too, wrestled with his feelings. He admired her resilience, her grace in the face of adversity. He wished to protect her, to offer her the kindness she deserved. But the chasm between their worlds was vast, marked by class, culture, and circumstance. Their unspoken bond was a fragile thread, stretching taut with tension and longing. Each glance, each word carried the weight of what could never be said aloud. The house, once a place of luxury, had become a stage for silent sorrow and hidden dreams. As days turned into weeks, she made a decision. She would no longer be a prisoner to silence and neglect. She began to find small ways to reclaim her dignity, volunteering to care for widows and divorced women in her community, sharing her story not as a victim but as a beacon of hope. Through her courage, she became a voice for those silenced by pain and shame. Her experience was a testament to resilience, a call to others to hold on to faith and self-respect even in the darkest times. Years passed, each one etching its mark on her soul like the fading lines of forgotten manuscript. She had left behind a grand palace, the cold, silent corridors where her voice had been drowned in neglect. She returned to her childhood home, the modest house filled with memories of warmth and love, a stark contrast to the lonely opulence she had escaped. Her family welcomed her with open arms, their embrace a balm to her wounded spirit. Yet, she carried with her the invisible scars of betrayal and solitude. The world outside had not changed, nor had the harsh judgments that awaited women who dared to leave their marriages. But she refused to be broken, determined to transform her pain into purpose. She began working with widows and divorced women in her community. These women, like her, had faced rejection, loneliness, and social stigma. Together, they formed a sisterhood of resilience and hope, a sanctuary where broken voices found strength and stories of despair turned into songs of survival. In the humble rooms of the community center, she shared her story, not as a lament, but as a lesson. She spoke of how temptation begins with a glance, a word, an unnoticed kindness that can unravel even the strongest bonds. She warned against the slippery slope of neglect and loneliness, urging others to seek support and hold firm to their faith and dignity. Her voice became a beacon for those who had long suffered in silence. She embodied courage, the courage to walk away from pain, to reclaim one's life, and to rebuild from the ashes. In her heart, she nurtured a quiet hope that one day, women like her would not be judged and supported, that the walls of silence would crumble, replaced by understanding and compassion. At times, she still felt the pang of loneliness, a hollow ache that lingered like a shadow at the edges of her happiness. But now, she was surrounded by love and purpose, by women who lifted each other up, by a community that recognized her worth. Her story, once marked by neglect and sorrow, had blossomed into a testament of resilience and faith. It was a journey from darkness to light, from silence to voice, from despair to hope. And as she looked toward the future, she carried with her the lessons of the past, the power of faith, the strength of community, and the unyielding spirit of a woman who refused to be defined by her suffering.